Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we have Debbie Jordan Kauble on board today. Debbie Jordan Kauble was the central figure in Bud Hopkins' New York Times bestseller, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods, as well as the 1992 CBS miniseries, Intruders, using the pseudonym Kathy Davis to protect her young family. In 1992, she revealed her true identity and co-authored with her sister, Kathy Mitchell, Abducted, the story If the Intruders Continues, and she has just finished a revised, expanded edition of Abducted titled Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders. While more recently, she very rarely makes public appearances, she has appeared on the Discovery Channel's Investigation X, the History Channel's UFO Hunters, the Sci-Fi Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, Sightings, Maury Povich, Danny Bottagucci, Oprah Winfrey's AM Chicago, The Danny Petty Show, as well as others. She has been the guest speaker at numerous universities, think tanks, and conferences around the world, as well as guest appearances on numerous radio broadcasts and podcasts. She co-hosted her own podcast, Midwest Paratalk, with Greg Kauble, and together with Greg, co-founded the paranormal research team, The Paranormal Underground. Her special interest in paranormal research is with electronic voice phenomena, and she has collected many impressive examples over the last several years. She is a wife, mother to 4, and grandmother to 8. She's currently retired and resides in north central Indiana with her husband, Dave, 2 Yorkies and a cat. She was a member of the disaster action team for the local chapter of the American Red Cross, a member of Mensa, a licensed cosmetologist, and worked full-time at an automotive electronic parts supplier. So, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And to get into your most extraordinary stories, I've listened to some of your past interviews, and I found them like really impressive. And the one thing that I liked hearing is knowing that your siblings or your some of your relatives were also experiencers. So before we get into your story, I believe that your mom had this pretty interesting story. Could you get into that?
Well, in my mother, she's been passed away now for 20 years, but and I never realized this. Even after all the stuff started to happen in the house and Bud came to start the investigation and everything, it wasn't until she was talking to Bud that I actually heard her say this for the first time, that when she was a girl, she had strange memories of running through the woods behind her house and being chased by a little boy. And she remembered tripping and falling, but she didn't remember anything after that, which was just weird. But it was weird that she remembered that so much. I mean, good grief. She was probably my age when she told Bud that. So that had been a memory from 50 or 60 years ago, or 50 years ago, and she remembered that part. And like I told you earlier, she was adopted, so she really didn't have much memory of anything before the age of 2, which was when she was adopted. So
amazing.
But she felt like that was strange enough that she needed to tell Bud about it. He was talking to the whole family, especially during the first visit he came out there. And in particular, my mother, myself, and my older sister, who had quite an unusual experience in 1965. So
okay.
It seemed like the females in my family are the ones that had the experiences. My brother swears up and down on a stack of Bibles he'd never had anything happen. And my father never had, expressed that he had anything like that happen either. Although my dad always swore up and down he was psychic and that he could smell death when it was around. So he knew when someone was going to die because he could smell it.
Yeah.
Might come in handy. I don't know.
For some, it is a gift. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so.
Oh. So when's your earliest memory of a high strangeness or something that happened to you?
I think my earliest memories start around the age of 5 or 6, and one in particular that always stood out to me and I remembered was I was very attached to my older sister. I worshiped the ground she walked on. She was 11 years older than me. So to me, she was almost like a second mother. And whenever she would go down the neighbor's house down at the end of the street and spend the night with her friend down there, I'd be upset because I want to go with her, because I wanted to go everywhere with her. And so I can recall, I remember going to bed. I'm putting us all in bed. We were all in bed before the sun went down half the time. Didn't matter. If it was 8 o'clock, we were in bed. But I remember going to bed and wanting to be with where she was so badly. And I don't know whether I fell asleep or if this really, I don't know if this was a lucid dream or I actually left my body, but I suddenly realized I was outside of the house, but the sky was weird. It was a strange color around me, kind of a, like a dusk look to it. The light was muted and dull. Shadows were slightly different. It just felt weird to me. But and there was a breeze. There was a pretty consistent, somewhat stiff breeze that it was moving my hair. And somebody told me I could put my arms out and lean into the breeze and it would lift me and I could fly. So I did. And I started to fly. And I immediately thought, I'm going to fly down to my sister where she's at Denise's house. And I'm going to go be with my sister. And I remember flying to Denise's house and flying through the window of Denise's bedroom, seeing my sister and her friend rolling their hair with orange juice cans and listening to 45 records. And I'm in the corner of Denise's bedroom, up by the ceiling, watching my sister and wanting to get her attention, for her to talk to me, because I was so happy to see her. But then all of a sudden I got scared. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what if I float away and I go away from my family and I can't go home? And as soon as I felt that fear, that fear came into me, it's like someone snapped their finger and I woke up and I was in my bed.
Wow.
So, I mean, that is a weird dream to have as a little kid. And I probably maybe was in kindergarten, maybe not even in kindergarten yet, but I remember that. I have remembered that my whole life. Yeah. And I always thought it was what kind of kid has that kind of dream? But, and then again, a few years, it was around the same time, I'm thinking it was about 1965 or so. Around the same time, my older sister had her weird experience, which I'm sure you'll ask me about in a little bit. She was driving, and even though she was still, she was old enough to drive and old enough to drive us up to Michigan for a weekend. The girl that she was going to go visit was the same one that I had flown down to their house. Was this girl, she only stayed at this house during the summer. It was her grandparents' home. During the winter, she was back up in Detroit, Michigan, where she was from, where she lived. And I had also played with her little sister, who was about my age, who was in Detroit, but would occasionally come visit the grandparents. So Kathy said, well, can I, she took me to go with her on this little weekend trip. And I remember thinking I was such a big deal because I had this really cute round blue, powder blue little weekend bag. And I thought I was some hot stuff with this little weekend bag. I don't know why, but I remember that little bag. Anyway, we went to Michigan, went to the girl's parents' house. I can remember what I had for lunch. We had grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. We were playing in the backyard and I kicked a ball over the fence and I jumped over the fence to get it. And when I turned around to go back over the fence, I did not know where I was. I was lost and I did not recognize anything. And my friend was gone and I didn't know really where I was. So I walked around the front of the house to the street. It was like a cul-de-sac. So there was kind of a curve. And I saw a house and, remember I had never been there before, but this house, I thought that's the house that I was supposed to go to. That's where I was. So the door was open and I went in But when I went in the house, everything looked familiar, but yet jumbly. Like things weren't right. Pictures were on tables. Chairs were up on there was a chair on the sofa. I mean, things were just kind of jumbled and not quite right. And it made me scared. And so I turned around to leave this house. I didn't see anybody in there, and I turned around to leave. And when I did, between me and the door, there was this little boy. He's about the same height as me. I mean, he looked human, but he had really dark brown, dark eyes. And he was like, you know, he didn't want me to leave. He wanted me to stay and play with him. And he said, come with me. I have all kinds of cool toys here in my room. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I was a little kid and, you know, I was scared. And then there was a friendly face and you said toys. So, okay. You know, I went to his room with him. But when we went into the room, it wasn't like it was attached to a house. It was there. I don't remember any corners or lamps, light. I just remember it was a nice soft white light. Everything was illuminated, but yet there wasn't any lamps, you know, in this room. I remember there being kind of like a lower part in the center of the room and stuff in it. And I sat he had me sit on the edge of it, and I saw some red lights flashing on the wall, and I could see what looked like a table or something like a table just start sliding out of the wall. And he gave me something that I thought was a toy, set it down on my lap, and it was kind of like a shoebox with the hole in it, and it had like strings on it. And I thought it was like a, you know, some kind of musical instrument that you can pluck the strings and you play with it. I wasn't sure what it was, but I remember going to pluck the strings, and it felt like something stuck me in the leg, and it hurt, and I got scared. And I think at that point then I started to cry and wanted to go home. And the next thing I remember after that is being back in the living room in front of the front door where I first encountered the little boy. But now coming out of, you know, the back of the house is this woman that I thought was his mother, big woman. And she was mad that I was there. And she says to the little boy, what is she doing here? She does not belong here. And then it was like somebody literally just shoved me right out the door. Although I don't remember seeing anybody touch me or anything like that. I was just pretty much kind of spit out the house and the door. When I looked down the end of the walkway, there stood my sister, my older sister, looking at me. And I ran up to her. I'm like, oh, thank God. You know, I remember feeling relieved. There's my sister, you know, and I don't recall her saying anything to me. I don't remember her, you know, speaking at all. I just remember she took my hand, walked me back to Denise's house, and then we went home. I do know that later, I don't remember this, but later I was told, and I heard them talking when I got older about I was missing for quite a bit of the day, and they actually had the authorities looking for me. So when Bud came, it was actually my mother who said, what about that time in Michigan when you were missing? And I'm like, what do you mean I was missing? Because I didn't realize I'd been gone that long with the little boy or anything like that. So my sister actually remembered the name of the people up there, and Bud was able to find the woman whose house we went to. He talked to her on the phone, and she indeed confirmed that we had come up there, that I had wandered off. They didn't know where I'd been, and that my sister had found me and brought me back. Okay. So that was weird.
So you had missing time. You were brought into a house that didn't look like a house, that, you know, things were a bit off.
It looked like a house, but it didn't feel right. Yeah.
Oh. You know, at first I thought it could have been like a UFO, and that whole scenario thing was like a recreation for your benefit and for the child's.
It could be. I have absolutely no idea. All I can do in these little weird cases like this is tell you what I remember,
Yeah.
and tell you what other people confirm, and then beyond that, I have no more of an idea than you do.
Okay.
Anything for beyond that would be just guessing on my part.
Oh, okay. So what happened after that? Because I know that that your mom would shove you in the attic. So that was like out of the ordinary, at
It
least for
wasn't
Harry
just me
Potter. But
either. I mean, my sister Kathy and I both had these memories.
okay.
I don't, it's not very clear to me. All I can remember is mom being scared of someone in the house and trying to shove me in the closet and into the attic. My sister Kathy also has the same memory of my mother doing that with her when she was little. And, remember, she was 11 years older than me.
Okay.
So, I remember is that something really scared the hell out of my mom, and she was trying to hide me. So, and the same thing, my sister had reported pretty much the same thing.
So she was hiding you from what, basically?
Kathy said from some men who were going to come in and take me or her,
So humans, perhaps.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not.
So what happened to your sister? Experience-wise.
Well, it's funny too, because my sister's experiences are mostly with what they call the mantis type.
Really?
Like they look more like praying mantises.
Yep.
Mine have been more gray, big-eyed gray type and humanoid. But it was about in the 60s, sometime in about 65 or 66, she was going to take my mother to a bingo game. My mom loved to play bingo. So Kathy was going to drive her to the bingo game and drop her off and go do some stuff. And then was eventually going to go pick her up later on that evening. She remembered dropping mom off at the bingo game. And as she was driving down 10th Street in Indianapolis, she got near Holy Spirit Catholic Church. And for some reason or another, she suddenly felt this compulsion to pull in the parking lot and go behind the church, the big parking lot behind the church, which she did. And it was still a daylight when she did that. And she says, at this point, it get really weird. When she got back to the back of the church and she looked up, above her car was a huge UFO hovering over the parking lot. And it lifted her entire car up. It didn't just take her out. It took her whole car, her and her car, and lifted it right up out of the parking lot. I don't know what she remembered after that. All I remember is, as the story went, the next thing that happened is she wakes up in her car. It's in the parking lot behind the church. It's dark out. And not only is it dark out, it's now time to go pick my mom up from the bingo game. So many hours have passed, several hours passed. So she drove to the bingo game and picked up my mother and was totally hyped. I heard mom tell Bud that she just went a million miles a minute nonstop all the way home. She was really shook. And it was a story that she continued to repeat. Well, she never told us what happened from the time she lifted up into this thing and the time she woke up in the car. That part she didn't talk about, at least not with us. But she continued to tell the story for years and years. And we could tell as the younger siblings, there wasn't much we could do to get over on her or fluff up her feathers. So when she would tell this story and we'd make fun of her, we did believe her, but we just enjoyed watching her get mad, because she'd get mad and then she wouldn't talk about it anymore.
Oh, that's.
I mean, she was dead serious. And she has maintained this to this very day. Now my sister's in She's in a nursing home. She's had multiple strokes and she has dementia. So she doesn't even know me anymore. But when she still had all her faculties, she stood by her experience there in 65, and nothing ever wavered. And that was the first thing when I wrote to Bud Hopkins later, after that June 30, 1983 incident that left the mark in the yard, which propelled me to write to Bud. When I actually wrote the letter to him, I actually wrote about her experience first. So I literally kind of threw her under the bus. And I didn't ask her permission. So she was kind of mad at me when I did it, but she got over it. But yeah, that's what happened to my sister.
Did she ever describe the UFO she saw?
I think, if I remember correctly, I think she said it was round. I think it was a silver colored, and I think it had a lot of multicolored lights on the bottom of it and around the edge of it. Okay. Seemed to me like it was multicolored lights. So, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how I'm remembering it.
And how did she, she told you about the mantids?
This was later on when she talked to Bud. Now, she's never directly told me anything. Now, the first book that I wrote with her, and she wrote her own chapters, I had nothing to do with those. And I just kind of had to rearrange this little manuscript that we wrote to put her stuff into it. But when she talked to Bud, she talked about seeing, and I'm thinking it might have been during that 1965 experience that she had, when she recalled seeing these bigger, taller, mantis-like creatures. Yeah. I think it was during that 1965. And I believe perhaps going through some kind of a medical exam.
Yeah, that was my next question. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Wow. So she didn't feel like threatened by them, or did she feel anything from them?
I don't think so. Okay. I could be wrong. I mean, I'd have to actually, at this point, go back and look at the book because I don't remember. But I don't think she had anything like that. Okay. And I'm sorry if I look like I'm distracted, with the weather thing coming on my phone's kind of dinging me with weather advisories. I muted it so it wouldn't drive everyone crazy. But if I do look over like this, I'm looking at the radar.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, at the age of 6 or 7, you went missing for a day. Did we get into that?
Yeah. That was it. That was the Detroit one. There was another time when I was a little bit older and we lived on Michigan Street that I wandered off. And this was at a time when they were building 465, the interstate, through our neighborhood. Literally, it cut the end of our street off. And there were a lot of workers, men workers and stuff out there. And back in the day, back in the late 60s, early 70s, Mom would say, go outside and play. And we wouldn't go home till the street lights came on, and you could do that. And it was safe. But apparently I wandered off, and I still think I was down at the neighbor's house all day long. And the neighbors, the girls were several years older than me, which is, I think, why they didn't look there to begin with. But I was like playing with a Barbie doll or something in her room. And I didn't really realize how much time had passed. I disappeared in the morning, and it was late afternoon when I decided I was getting hungry and wanted to go home. And I remember walking back down the street, and there's police everywhere. And I'm like, what is going on here? And as I'm walking closer to my house, my mom comes running out to me and grabs me, and she's hysterical. And she's like, I don't know whether to kiss you or your... Yeah. I said, what did I do? She goes, where have you been all day? They thought that one of the workers from the highway had snatched me, a little girl. They were just terrified. I have very little memory of what I did that whole day, other than play with the baby doll. Oh, I don't know. Which, that's another little odd thing. I mean, I don't have anything else to add to that, but it's just
strange.
Another little weird thing about my weird life.
Wow.
So. That's what I should have named my book, My Weird Life.
So yes,
They liked Extraordinary Contact better, though. They said,
yeah,
it sounded more classy.
it's sellable. So did anything happen to you during that time and when you were a teenager? Because you met a certain, a gang of boys during that time. So just wanted to fill in the blanks.
Oh, the 3 boys in Kentucky.
Yeah.
That was
something.
weird.
Yeah.
That was strange too. Yes.
Okay.
I'd been down to Rough River State Park many, many times with my best friend. I mean, this woman is a woman that's still my best friend today. We're both 60. I'm 62. She's 63. We've been hanging out together since I was in 7th grade and she was in 8th. And so I used to go down with them. Her family had a little cabin, was really a trailer down at Rough River State Park for years. So every July weekend, 4th of July or excuse me, it's summertime vacation, I would go down with her mom and her dad and her brothers. And we'd go swimming and play on the pontoon boat and all kinds of teenager stuff. But one time, her and I were out in her dad's truck and we were playing on the CB radio. Because back in the 70s, CB radios were popular and everybody had one. And we thought we were just cool as we could be. So we're out there trying to talk to boys on the CB radio. We started talking to these boys. You got to remember, we were in the middle of nowhere in this state park, down in Kentucky. And we got a hold of these boys somehow on the CB radio. And Terry got bored with it after a while. And so I think she went in. Her brothers had already gone in. The fire was still going. The campfire was still going. I was still in the truck. I said, I'll be in a minute. I was still talking to these boys, this one boy in particular. And all of a sudden, I hear this boy say, I see you. And I said, what do you mean you see me? And I looked up and I could see headlights coming up over the ridge. And first thing I thought to myself, oh my God, Terry's dad is going to kill me. I thought I am dead, because here are these strange boys coming from nowhere. And I kind of freaked out. And I went in and got Terry and she came. She was out. These boys pulled up behind the truck. They kind of rolled up real quiet and slow. I don't recall hearing anything, any of the vehicle or anything. And 2 boys got out and they looked like twins and they were tall and they had dark hair and really dark eyes. And then this boy got out and he was much shorter than them, but I mean, he wasn't much taller than me. I'm 5'3". And he had blonde wavy hair, kind of longer, like the boys used to wear in them. You probably don't remember. You probably weren't even born then.
I'm 45, so yeah.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. So
yeah.
I was born in 75. Anyway, but yeah.
So he walks, the 2 taller guys flank him kind of, and he walks up to me and he starts talking. And I just immediately fell in teenage girl love because he was so stinking cute. I thought he was just so cute, I was swoony, and it's funny because the 2 guys that were with him, I don't ever recall them saying one word. He did all the talking. And when Bud went back and talked to Terry and her brothers and her mother and father, they all recalled the same thing, that the 2 dark-headed, dark-eyed boys never said a word. The blonde guy all did all the talking. And they all told Bud that the blonde guy looked like a male version of me.
What?
They all said that they thought he looked like he could be my brother, that he had the same kind of features I had. And I remember this boy, he just asked all kinds of questions about us. What kind of television shows did we like to watch? What did we do for fun? What did we like to eat? What was our favorite thing to drink? Just every question was about us. Terry says, come on, we took them into the trailer. And this was late at night, and her parents had retired and gone to bed hours before, and her brothers were all in there, but they were all, ready to go to bed. When we walked into the living room of this, trailer, there sat her entire family, mom, dad, brothers, everybody just sitting in chairs and stuff, just like waiting for them to come in. Mm. And I kept thinking to myself, I'm not dead. They're not going to kill me. I mean, as soon as the boys walked in with us, everybody sat there like they were frozen and didn't say a word. And the cute one that I liked, he says, "Thank you for inviting us into your home. We appreciate it." And then it was like somebody snapped their fingers and everybody was animated and started to talk. And her mom offered them something to drink. And, they chatted he chatted with her mom and dad for a minute, her brothers, and then me and Terry and the boys and her brothers went back out and kind of sat around the fire that was still a little bit burning because we had built a little bonfire earlier in the night. And that's when a lot of the conversation went on about us, asking all kinds of questions about us. And I did remember we asked them where they had camped. And they said that, we just camped right over this ridge. He described somewhere to Terry, because I didn't know anything about Rough River, but Terry and the boys did. Her brothers knew kind of the lay of the land. They'd been going there all their life. And so she's like, "Oh, okay." And we asked them what they did, and they said they were in a band. Okay, so when you tell a bunch of teenage girls you're in a band, it's like, ah. so anyway, they if I recall right, I think he gave me a card with something on it, like a business card, you know what I mean, or something. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. I had told you some of this stuff. The little things, but. So anyway, then they left, and I was like, just still mesmerized by this guy. And I'm like, "Oh, I have his card. Yay." So the next day, Terry's like, something didn't sound right about the description of their campsite. She goes, "I know exactly where they said they were, and I've never seen anybody there. Let's go look." So we got in her car and we drove all over the area where they said they were, and there was nothing there. And there was no sign of anybody having even been there, And so, and if I recall correctly, when I got home, this thing that he had given me disappeared and I never found it. So, but yeah, it's things like this that happened to me when I was a kid. And even as an adult, when I had weird stuff happen, it wasn't just me. It was my BFF, her mom and dad, all her brothers. I mean, it was the whole family. Yeah. And when Bud came and did the investigation, and he did go and talk to Terry's mom and dad and brothers and Terry, and they again confirmed, yeah, that was weird. And like I said, they even thought that he looked like me, which I didn't even know that at the time. So, if I had this stuff happen to only me and nobody else was ever around or ever saw anything strange or anything, I would seriously doubt my own sanity. And that ain't no lie. I still sometimes think, there might be something wrong with me, So, but yeah, that happened. I might have been, okay, Terry was driving, so she was at least 16. Of course, I was a year younger than her, so I had to be at least 15 or 16 years old around the time.
Now, were the family like paralyzed?
I don't know. When we walked in, they just were sitting there and they just weren't moving or talking. And you'd think, and I thought it was odd even at the time, because I fully expected Terry's dad to get up and go, "Who the hell is this? What are you dragging these boys in my trailer and blah, 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 but instead they all just sat there and looked. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not dead yet. Terry's dad hasn't killed me yet. You know what I mean? And then the boy spoke, and that's when everybody just, acted like this is completely normal. Like, come on in, have a seat. You want something to drink? How you doing? Blah, 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 So like, I wouldn't say they were paralyzed, but they just were like, it seemed like they were just turned off for a minute, you know?
Yeah, that's so strange.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
did anything happen after that during like your early adult life, like during the teenage years? Did anything of consequence happen?
Well, let's see.
Because you got
I,
married eventually, and stuff happened during those days. But
I got married quite young. I'm trying to think. I was probably 17 when it was in the fall. I was out piddling around with a couple of friends, and the one gal was a couple years older than me. She was driving. We used to go roller skating on Friday and Saturday night at the roller rink. And that was a big deal for me back then. I loved that. And my girlfriend was a big roller skater, and so was her boyfriend. He wasn't at the skating rink that night. So we apparently decided to get in her car and stalk him and see where he was, as teenage girls do. And in Indiana, everybody lives out in the cornfield. So, I mean, we were out, it was me, Dolores, and another gal, and we were out driving around trying to go by her boyfriend's house and see if his car was in the driveway and, stupid stuff like that. It was quite late at night. And I remember seeing a light in the sky. And I got kind of anxious, I mean, like when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, it's a star. And then I kind of got like that hair rise on the back of your neck, kind of. It's before you can even realize why, but something doesn't sit right or strike right, And I think I remember saying to the girls, look, it's a UFO or something like that. And the girl in the back seat, she got scared right away. And she's like, don't say that. It's not funny. And then I think my friend Dolores and I kind of looked at each other and were laughing about how she was getting scared, and of course I didn't want to let on that I felt a little weird, but so we kept watching it. And I remember seeing the light getting closer and beginning to really realize that it was not right. It was moving really strange, like some kind of zigzaggy formation, and as it zigged and zagged, it was coming closer and closer down to Earth, down to the Earth. And I'm like, this ain't no star. And then an airplane can't fly like that. So then it gets weird, because the next thing I remembered was, which I didn't remember this right away, but it came back to me. The car was kind of enveloped in sort of like a black cloud, and then it felt as if someone drugged me out, got me out of the car by my legs and pulled me out of the car. And I recall some hazy memory of some kind of medical procedure that was painful and scary. And the next thing I remember, I'm sitting in the car. We are off the side of the road, and Dolores is standing out in the road looking at the star in the sky, or looking at this light in the sky. And I think I got out of the car. The girl in the back seat was like laying on the floorboard, whimpering like a pup. And I got out of the car and I remember walking up to Dolores, and I can't remember what we said. And I believe Dolores made some comment like, gee, time flies when you're having fun. And she was being sarcastic, because suddenly we realized, Jesus Christ, her mom and dad are about ready to get up and go to work. We got to hurry up and get back home and climb through the window and get back in bed before their alarm comes off, So then, and that always stuck with me. Honestly, I never seen that girl again that was in the back seat that night. And I don't know if she just avoided us on purpose, but I did see Dolores many times, but we never spoke about it. And then again, when Bud came to begin the investigation, Dolores was one of the people that we found that he interviewed. And when he mentioned this incident to her, he said, okay, so, we're going to talk about what happened when you went to go stalk Kenny and see where, you girls were out driving around in the cornfield. And he goes, at the light that you guys saw. And she goes, you mean the one in the sky or the one on the ground? And I looked at her and I looked at Bud, because until that point, I didn't realize that I'd remembered it actually being on the ground. And that's why she was out of the car, because she was going to walk over to it and look at it. So she remembered it, and it made her very uncomfortable. And when Bud asked her, would you like to have, regression to see if you can remember more? She goes, nope. She goes, I've gotten along just fine all these years without knowing, and I don't believe I want to know. And she says, whatever was, what happened, and I can't change it. And so now I'm not really interested in remembering anything else about it. And he's like, hey, if that's the way you feel, then that's exactly what we're going to do. That's, and if it isn't broke, we ain't going to try to fix it. So, because she was functioning perfectly fine. And so that's, something strange that happened to me when I was still a teenager. And then I got married. Let's see, I turned 18 in February, and I got married in April of that year. I think it was 18 when I got married. And was shortly after I got married, and we lived in an attic apartment in the middle of town in Indianapolis. It was hot as hell, and we'd sleep with the windows open and the fan on. And I remembered I had a dream one night. Charlie was laying right there next to me in bed, sound asleep. And I was in bed and had been asleep, and I woke up and I saw these two gray guys standing at the foot of my bed. I saw them coming towards the foot of my bed from the window. And I remember thinking, don't touch me. Oh my God. This terror just like blasted through me. And I remembered thinking, just please don't touch me. Please don't touch me. Don't come any closer. That's all I could think. Well, something happened, because suddenly I was calm. I no longer felt this fear and terror. And one of these dudes had a black box in his hand. It wasn't very big, small shoebox size, and it was black, and it looked like a red light on it. I don't know whether it was in it and there was like a hole on top, or if it was a flat light, but it was something red in there. And it kind of floated over to me. And at this point, I'm sitting up in bed, still got the covers on, and the husband's still right next to me. Kind of floats over to me and kind of sits down on my lap a little bit. And I'm like, what is this? Can I have it so I can show Charlie that you were here, or whatever? And they're like, no, you can't have it. But when you see it again, you'll remember it and you'll know what it's for, and how to use it. I'm like, okay. And then they kind of took the box back. That's all I remember. They kind of like slid back away from me a little bit. They got kind of shimmery, and then they were gone. But I remembered the whole thing. And I wasn't asleep. This wasn't a dream. I was awake. And I tried to wake Charlie up, and he wouldn't wake up. And I lay back down and I fell right to sleep. After it happened, I felt calm and I was relaxed. And as soon as I laid down and closed my eyes, I was out. After I tried to wake him up and he wouldn't wake up, I'm like, oh, I'll tell him in the morning. Boom. And I'm out. Next morning I wake up and I'm like, dude, Charlie, you can't believe what happened last night. And I couldn't get you awake. And I told him the whole thing. And then I called my mother and told her the whole thing. And I called my BFF and I told her the whole thing. I was like spastic about it. And the only thing my husband could say was, well, what'd you eat for dinner last night? Sound like you got one hell of a nightmare. I'm like, it wasn't a dream. I was awake. I'm trying to tell you, so, and that was, I was shortly after I was married. So I was 18, at least 18 at the time. It was before I got pregnant with my son, Robert.
What did the two guys look like?
Grays.
Okay. Yeah. I see.
Big heads, no hair, skinny, little skinny bodies, big black eyes, barely any mouth or nose, just a little slit, little pinch of a nose, you know, not much of a face at all, but mostly eyes, just the big old eyes.
Okay.
And I don't even remember them talking to me. I don't remember seeing a mouth moving. It's just I knew what they wanted. I knew what they were saying to me. You know, they were speaking English, my language. I understood it. So, but I don't recall them doing it with their mouths. But like I said, I was not asleep for that one. I was wide awake, and I told anybody who would listen.
So you weren't drugged up?
Nope.
Or
I didn't take drugs. I didn't drink alcohol. Didn't even smoke weed. Nope. I don't know if I went anywhere or how long that interaction took. That's all I remember of it. Okay. But I do remember initially when I saw them being petrified, terrified, and not wanting them to touch me, just on the verge of completely losing it, you know. And then the next minute, I'm totally relaxed and not scared, you know, and lucid enough to say, "What is that? Can I have it?" You know. Yeah. And I can't explain that. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, they can manipulate you.
Apparently somebody did. And I don't recall them even touching me. Now I've heard other people say, well, they touched me and then I calmed down. I mean, maybe that's possible, but I don't recall anybody even touching me. I'm just 1 minute I'm freaking out and the next minute I'm chill.
When I woke up, well, I didn't know anything about ETs, but you know, around 2007, 2008, when I woke up, this was in I was living in a second story apartment. And I woke up and I had this, what I thought at first it was a transparent face, but it turned out like it's like an upside down pear. So I didn't know anything about ETs, but it looks to me like a more of a mantid type of face. And so about that, it really took years to figure out, because I didn't know anything about ETs until I met my first abductee, which I almost got married to. But again, I woke up having this face, this head floating just above me, looking at me, and I wasn't scared at all for some reason, which normally I would have panicked. But again, so did they do something to me? I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so pretty interesting though. So yeah,
it's been a weird life.
Did they? I'm wondering if they came to see you and your husband to sort of get an approval rating of if your husband was okay.
Well, I don't know, but if they did, they I don't know what. We didn't stay married very long. I had 2 kids. I was probably pregnant the whole time we were married, and then that was the end of that.
Okay.
So, because my kids were real close together. My boys, goodness, they were about 14 months apart. So I was pretty much pregnant the whole time we were married.
So,
but yeah, I don't know.
So
he never has told me that he's ever had any
No?
strange experiences, at least not that I know of.
Okay.
So,
have your children gone through the same things you did?
You know, my children, when we were living with my mom and dad for that time period, they were toddlers when we moved in. Yeah. When their father and I got divorced, they were really little. I mean, good Lord, I think my youngest was maybe 4 months old. And then 14 months after that was my other one. And it wasn't too long after that I ended up moving back home with my parents. Okay. And so they were little when we lived there, and all this stuff started happening. But I do know, and they were before they were in kindergarten. I mean, there was a time when one of them came running out from the room screaming that there was a red spider on the wall, a red light on the wall. You know, he called it the red spider, and he said it was lit up. Of course, we went in and couldn't see anything. And then he'd tell us that the little man with the big head was going to come out of the closet and take his brother, which is my younger son. And it's funny because my younger son would be the one that would wake up covered in blood from his nosebleeds. And my older son, one time, it was so pitiful. Robbie started screaming. I mean, the kids were in bed and Robin started screaming. He was screaming bloody murder, and we went running in there. Robin was like frozen in his bed and he couldn't move. He was like so stiff, and it was scaring me. But when I looked over, my younger son his whole face was bloody. There was blood all over his bed, and it was smeared all the way up the wall, like handprints smeared up the wall to the window. And he was sound asleep through all the screaming stuff. So now I woke him up. We took him to the emergency room, my mother and I. And the doctor said, well, this kid has poked something in his nose, a toy or a pencil or something. I'm like, there's nothing in their room that he could do that to. I'm like, that's not a viable explanation for me, because I know what's in there. I was a hover mom. And he said, well, then he stuck his finger in there and scratched himself with his fingernail. I'm going to have to cauterize it. I'm like, okay. So they cauterized it, but I'm like, look, this little boy has fat fingers and a tiny little nose. You cauterize this up way up in here. How in the hell do you think that little fat finger got all the way up that nose? And then slept through the screaming bloody murder that his brother did, you know, because he was still, I had to wake him up, shake him. So I never believed that, but they cauterized it. He was one that had the nosebleeds. He was the one with the speech impediment, you know, and he had nosebleeds when he was little most of the time. I don't know what was going on with those kids. All I know is that after the June 30, 83 incident, I kind of had a nervous breakdown. I got extremely protective of them, and I could not sleep all night long. I would sit up in their room between the twin beds where my baby slept and wait and watch. And I had no idea what I was waiting for or watching, but I just knew that I couldn't sleep. As soon as the sun came up and my parents got up and other people in the house started to move around, then I would literally pass out from exhaustion. This went on for a long time. And then, of course, when Bud came, he did talk to the boys, and he was very, we had a rule in my house, in my mom and dad's house. We did not talk about anything weird around my kids. I didn't want them to be scared. That was my number one priority, to protect them. And number two, if they did have any memories or anything weird happen to them, I didn't want those memories to be contaminated by things they heard when they were little and then assimilated in a different way as their own. You know, I didn't want that to happen. So we did not talk about the weird stuff around them. So when Bud came to do his investigation, you know, it was a real tricky way. We were very careful around what they said. Bud was very respectful and careful about how he talked to them and when he asked them questions. And it's kind of like watching somebody that was interviewing a child that's been molested. You know, you give him paper and pencil and say, draw me some pictures about, you know, and Robbie goes, that's the man with the big head in the closet. And he goes, really? And he goes, Robbie said, yeah, the man with the big head, he comes out of the closet and he takes my brother. And Bud says, well, does he ever take you? You know, and he said, no, I can't move, you know. But neither one of them has, now they're in their 40s. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them talks about it. Neither one of them, the oldest one does not want to talk about it. He won't talk about it, even if you ask him. The younger one, he's had strange things happen to him. And he's been a cab driver most of his adult life over the overnight shift. So you already know he done seen some things. He's seen a lot of weird stuff in this town, not just the people. Yeah. And he'll tell me occasionally about it, you know, that he saw something in the sky or he had a weird dream or something like that. So he'll talk about it a little bit more. My oldest son, nope. He's the one with the child, my granddaughter. And I think his main goal is to try and protect her. Because I think in the back of his mind, he worries about her because she's 14 now. But when she was about 5 or 6, Man, she might not even been that old. She may be 4 or 5. I can't remember. I was traumatized by it myself. I mean, the same rule applied with her as it always did with the boys. We never talked about any of this stuff around her or anything. And we'd go so far as if there was like, an alien face or something on TV, we'd quickly change the channel, so she didn't even have to see it. But she started having night terrors around this age. It lasted several months, maybe up to 6 months. 4 to 6 months, I guess. She started waking up in the night screaming that little men were coming through her window to take her, and she was scared. And my son, of course, the first reaction he had was to be pissed off at me. And I got a nasty phone call from him. Mom, what are you telling her? What are you letting her be seeing it? Because she used to come to my house every weekend. That's my girl,
Mm-hmm.
And so she'd come spend the night with grandma and grandpa. We have fun. But I'm like, dude, I'm not saying anything to her. We don't talk about this stuff around here. I swear on a stack of Bibles, we do not talk about this stuff around here. I do not know where she is getting this from. And he's like, well, she has to be getting it from somewhere. I'm like, dude, she's not getting it from here. I promise you. He was so mad that he wouldn't let her come and stay with me for several months. And it broke my heart, but I understood because I was their mother, so I understood, but it did break my heart, especially since I knew I didn't do anything and I didn't know how to stop it.
No.
He made Antialien Spray out of room freshener. We made a new label. He bought her a nightlight. He bought her a radio to play at night. He made her window like it was, they got room darkening curtains and made them all closed tight so she felt safe. And he had to go through this whole ritual every night when she went to bed for her to feel calm. And she finally stopped doing it. And she never did it again after that. She outgrew it or whatever it was, stopped. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like I said, she's 14 now. She'll be 15, not too terribly long. And she was at my house last year, right before the pandemic started. She had come up to stay for a couple of weeks with grandma. She's my girl. And we were watching TV, and then some commercial for Ancient Alien come on the television. And I thought, okay, she's 14 now. I'm not gonna, you can't protect them from this stuff forever. She's going to be in school around kids, And so I didn't say anything about it. I just didn't even mention it at all. And then after the commercial was over, she turned around and looked at me and she said, Nini. I said, what? She said, do you believe in aliens? And I kind of looked at her and I thought, what did this child just say to me? And I tried to hide my surprise. And I just looked at her and said, yep, sure do. And that's all I said. That's all I said. And she looked at me and she goes, cool, so do I. And I said, cool.
Yay.
And that was it. And I hope if she ever has something she wants to say or talk to me about, she knows she can talk to me.
Yay, Granny.
And that she'll be safe talking to me.
Yeah.
I hope that she realizes that. I hope there's nothing for her to have to talk to me about or ask me about, honestly. But I kind of figure, being how she came from this family, chances are pretty slim that she won't have something to say. So, and I don't understand, there's a lot of theories out there and maybe something to it. Clearly, it looks like that in my particular case, because I can only speak for my case. But, it seems to be a familial thing or a generational thing, started with my mother, maybe started with her mother. We don't know because she was adopted. Then me, my sister, and then my kids. And of course, I had boys. And then, I don't know what that was about with my granddaughter, but yeah,
okay.
We're
So
definitely.
You're not aware if they took some of your eggs?
Well, I don't know. Remember when I told you about that November incident with the 3 girls? I think that medical procedure I had was something like that. I mean, it felt like, something was poking me in my abdominal area,
Okay.
So I don't know what it was. Nobody bothered to tell me what they were doing or what it was for. So I can only guess.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Okay. Oh, damn. Okay. So Intruders. No, I
Are,
know
are you scared yet?
no, no. It's I've heard a lot. It's just that, it's hard to talk about certain subjects.
Yeah, I know it is.
Yeah.
That's fact.
So yeah, Intruders happened in 83.
The June 30, 1983
That's it.
experience is what Intruders is surround that. That's the central
Story.
thing in that book.
Okay. So what? So I think you were living at your mother's also.
That's when I was living at my mom's.
Yeah.
The weird stuff with the kids and the red light, the red spider in the nosebleeds and all that started up after June 30, 1983. So that would tell me Rob was born in 79, Case was born in 80. So yeah, that's about right, because their ages, because they were little toddlery kids, you know, they weren't in kindergarten yet. Mm-hmm. But okay, I was June 30, 1983. I was living with my parents and my two little kids. I'd just gotten divorced, didn't have a job, didn't have any money. So the gal that lived behind me, who was a friend of mine that lived behind my parents, she was a seamstress. And she's like, you want to make a little extra money? Come on over here and you can cut patterns out for me. I'll give you some money for that. That saves me a lot of time. I'm like, okay. So I used to go over and cut patterns for her. She made costumes. And on this particular night, I was going to go over to her house and cut out some patterns, make a little money. And then I would give the money to my mom to help pay for food for us, you know. And so we had finished supper. And I was standing at the kitchen window at the sink washing my hands. And I saw this light in the pump house of my mom and dad's swimming pool. And I knew that was wrong because I had been out there earlier putting chlorine in the pool. I tried to do chores around the house to make up for the fact that I was living here for free, you know, so I would help take care of the pool. And I knew I had struggled with that rusty slide lock to make sure that was shut, because my old man would have flipped out if I left that door open, because critters would get in there from the woods. So I thought, why is that door open? And why is that light weird looking? I mean, it wasn't, there's something about the light that didn't look quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it at that moment. So I mentioned it to my mom, and she's like, don't worry about it. When your dad gets home, he can take care of it. I'm like, okay. So a few minutes later, I get in my car. This was a time when my dad was working second shift at the Ford Motor. He was an electrician. So he'd get home maybe 11:30 or 12, something like that. It was in the evening after dinner when I left. The house was a tri-level, and it sat on the piece of land, and one part of the driveway went down in front of the house to the garage, which was attached to the house. But another part of the driveway forked off and went alongside the house, the swimming pool, and there was a little turnaround in front of my dad's workshop back there behind the swimming pool. My dad had a big workshop, and he restored antique motorcycles, and he built radio control airplanes and just all kinds of stuff back there. It was huge. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go on ahead and drive down that little side drive and then make the turnaround and then come back up just to make sure there's nobody out there lurking around, because I'm about to leave my mom and my two little kids here alone. And that just didn't feel right to me. So I did. And when I did do that, the light was off, the door was shut. And I'm like, did I just see something in my head, you know? And at that point, that's when I noticed the door to the pedestrian door to the garage that was attached to the house was now open. And remember, I told you I had put the dog in the garage earlier in the day because she was in heat. So she was not a dog that stayed in the house. She liked to be outside. So we put her in there at night to keep her from roaming the neighborhood. And I knew that once that door was open, she was gone. So I'm like, well, darn, Penny's out, you know. So anyway, I went on ahead and went over to my friend's house, which was like 2 minutes right behind us, straight behind us. But I called my mom and I said, hey, the door to the pedestrian door of the garage is open. So Penny's out. She's like, ugh, that stupid dog, you know. She's like, don't worry about it. I said, the light, I don't see anything funny in the backyard. The light is out now. And she's like, well, maybe the bulb burned out. And she's like, don't worry about it. I'll just lock the doors, you know, and your dad will be home from work. So I'm like, okay. So I hung up the phone. And as soon as I hung it up, it rang again. And I picked it up on instinct, you know, because I practically had just let go of it. And it was my mom. And so my friend and her husband were standing there. And my mom says, I want you to come home right now. And she sounded afraid. And that's very much not like my mother. So I'm like, well, what's wrong? Then I start panicking. And she's like, I just want you to come home. And my friend's husband heard me and he goes, tell her to call the police. That's what they get paid for. And she heard him and she said, I don't want anybody here but you. I'm like, okay, I'm on my way. And I told Deanna, I said, look, I'll be back in a little bit. I got to go find out what's going on. She's like, okay, well, let me know. And I left and went home and I pulled up that side driveway again. And I got out. I parked, though, next to the house. And I got out. My mom was standing in the door of what I called the Florida room on that side of the house. And I walked in there and I said, I'm going to go out and look around. Oh, you got to remember, I'm not thinking about aliens or UFOs or any crazy stuff like that. I'm thinking burglars, prowlers, somebody that's about to go in there and rob my mom. And I'm about to mess somebody up because my babies are in there. My dad had a shotgun next to the trash compactor out there. And I picked it up. And my mother specifically said, you know, that's not loaded. I said, I don't care. Whoever I beat to death with it ain't going to figure out it's loaded till I hit him with it. So, you know, I'll get close enough. And this is all strange because I was not a brave. I would do that now. I am that girl now. I don't play, but back then I would not have done that in a million years. So I don't even know what came over me. Wow. I got all brave and everything, but I went out there, walked around, didn't see anything. Did find the dog under my dad's ladder truck, tried to get the dog to come out so I could put her back in the garage. And she was having none of it. She was whining and carrying on something fierce. And I'm like, fine, stay there. I don't care. And I went back in. I went to the pedestrian door of the garage and I walked in. Like the guy hunting, you know, that rascally rabbit. I'm all over that garage thinking surely there's somebody here. I had the light on. The only where anybody could have hidden was in a mattress or behind a mattress that was kind of leaned up against the wall on one side. And so I started to go around that mattress thinking whoever's in there's got to be. They've got to be here. So I yelled out some profane something. And when I got to look and there was no one there, and all of a sudden I felt weird. I felt like I was on fire. I suddenly felt super hot and it felt like I could feel every molecule of my body vibrate. And I thought, oh my God, what in the hell is wrong with me? I've got to get out of here. So I turn and I start to run through the pedestrian door. And in that very moment, something hit me in the chest that later I would say, whatever that was killed me. And I'm Debbie 2.0.
Wow.
Whatever it was like a ball of light. It started right in my like solar plexus area, and it spread through my arms, my legs, up in my head. I could not see anything but this intense white light. And I know damn good and well my eyes were closed. That's just your natural instinct. Yeah. But I could still see it through my eyelids. It was so intense. Wow. And I was vibrating. Everything was vibrating. And it felt like time stopped. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm dead. I just died, you know? And that had to only last a few seconds. I don't know how long that was, but I honestly don't believe I would have survived more than a few seconds of that initial blast. The light quickly receded, faded, got less. And the vibrations started to slow down and stop. The burning sensation stopped. But I couldn't move. I could move my eyes. I could look, but I couldn't see very well because my eyes were like flash bulbs. When you get your picture taken and you didn't blink and you got all these white spots all over everything and you can't see hardly anything. And I'm suddenly outside the door onto the patio, and I could see movement out in front of me. At one point, I can't remember when, but I felt like somebody pulled down on my right shoulder just slightly. And I felt like in my mind, I saw a like knitting needle on fire stuck in my ear. That's what it felt like. And I heard a voice, but I didn't see anyone. And it said it was unfortunate that I had felt this pain. Oh. And I noticed a white ball of light about the size of a basketball, probably 20, 25 feet out in front of me in the yard. It went down very slowly, and then it went back up to about as high as I am tall. I'm 5'3". And I distinctly felt as if it were looking at me. Don't know why. And that's when I noticed the thing in the yard, which really wasn't much bigger than the pump house, swimming pool pump house. Wasn't that big. Maybe 10 feet tall, maybe 10 feet in diameter at its widest, but egg-shaped. And it also looked as if it wasn't maybe quite all the way on the ground. It had that ever so slight bobble that like a fishing bobber would have on a really calm, smooth lake, that just ever so slight. I had these 4 appendages off of it all the way around, like legs, but yet they didn't look sturdy enough to withstand the weight. I felt they were more for stabilizing it rather than supporting the weight of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to look at it. When I first saw it, I'm like, but I did not want to look at it because in my mind, I'm thinking I need to know if this thing is moving close to me. Like, not, I can't do anything about it, but I still needed to know, I didn't really want to look at it. So I kind of side-eyed it a bunch of times, and I've seen all this movement in front of me. Then I realized there's like 6 little kids in the yard. I can't see a lot of detail because my eyes are blown at this point. It's amazing. I can actually figure out how many there were. They were everywhere in the yard, and they all kind of came together in a line. And then they kind of slid down towards this thing. Everyone's called it a craft for 35 years. In retrospect, I don't know where in the hell that 6 even little kids could fit in this thing and fly anywhere. I don't know what this thing was, but they went into it. They were, I told Bud at first, to me, they almost looked bullet shaped because they had a really big head and they were real skinny. Okay. But they were like the size of a 7 or an 8-year-old. They weren't like a full grown adult. So I'm like, why are these kids in our yard? This is what I'm thinking. Then I remember thinking, oh my God, all this crazy is going on. And what is happening with my children, my kids? And I start freaking out, my kids. Immediately I hear a voice that says, your children are fine. Oh. And then I start feeling calmer. And then I hear my name being called. And as soon as I heard my name, now this is where it really gets crazy. It was like someone snapped their fingers. And everything I just told you, I forgot. And I remember being able to move suddenly. I turn around. I start walking towards the sound of the voice. As it turns out, it was my mom, who was at the top of the stairs at the kitchen. Again, it's a tri-level, so there's different levels. And she called my name out through the kitchen door. And when she saw me, she's like, are you okay? Is everything all right? And I said, everything's cool. I said, but I don't I don't want to sew anymore. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I feel weird and gross and icky, and I just want to get wet. I just need to get wet. I don't know why. So I called my friend. I'm like, dude, I don't want to sew. I said, I don't feel like doing that anymore. How about we go swimming? She's like, oh, yeah, it's fine. I went back over to her house, and then her and her daughter came back. And then the weird part was I was missing this was a couple hours past. Her and her husband never mentioned what took you so long. Was never mentioned. And even later when Bud went and talked to them, they didn't realize I had been gone that long. It never registered in their head. Something in them shut off, even over there on the next street. So anyway, me and her daughter come back to the house, and we go walk across the yard to get in the swimming pool. Her daughter stepped on something in the yard, and she thought she'd stepped on a bee at first. She said it stung, and then her foot tingled, and then it started to go numb. Well, we couldn't see anything. We looked at her foot, we didn't see anything. Her mom's like, get in the pool, feel better. If it's a bee sting, that'll help, the cold water. So we got in the pool, and within a few minutes of being in the pool, none of us felt good. All of us started to feel kind of sick, queasy, and my vision started going crazy. There started to be white halos around all the lights. And my eyes burned and watered really bad. And I'm like, and I got a bad headache. And my friend's like, well, let's go to White Castle. Maybe if we eat something, we'll feel better. You know, White Castle is open all 24 hours. And so I think my dad might have come home right about the time we were leaving to go to White Castle, or right. And so it had to be like around midnight, because my dad didn't get off work. You know, he was on second shift at Ford. So anyway, we tried to go to White Castle, but we aborted that because all of us thought we were going to throw up. So they dropped me off at home, and I went home. And they went home. The next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swollen shut. I couldn't open my eyes. I was in excruciating pain. My mom took me to the emergency room. The emergency room happened to, there was an eye doctor there, but he said, I can't really look at you like I need to. I have an office across the street. Will you please take her across the street to my office? I'll make sure they get her in. So that's what they did. First thing he says to me is, did you look into the arc of a welder's torch? And I'm like, no, no, I did not. And of course, at this point, I don't remember still what just happened the night before. I don't remember it. The memory of that didn't come back until several days later, around on the 4th of July weekend. And that's also when we saw the mark in the yard for the first time. As soon as I saw the mark in the yard, and my mom out of nowhere says, oh, that's where the UFO landed. It was like, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I told Bud, it was like somebody pulled the finger out of the dike and the water just flooded out. The memories just flooded back. And like I was looking at that mark, all I could see were these two big black eyes. And then I started to remember. And I was completely freaked out. I think I had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't sleep at night. That's when I started sitting up all night long with the kids, watching over my kids. I couldn't go to the bathroom at night in the bathroom upstairs because the window overlooked that mark in the yard. And I kept feeling like someone was going to grab me out of that window. So I would have to either hold it or go to the basement, to the bathroom down there, because I couldn't go in there, not at night. And, all kinds of weird stuff started happening. Started having more paranormal, poltergeist activity started happening. I started doing weird things like waking up in the middle of the night with these images that I would try to draw, and words and symbols and things that I would try to draw them and write them down. Just everything just went berserk after that for a long time. It finally calmed down, but my eyes were never right after that. Mm-hmm. I got diagnosed with cataracts in my 30s, and I ended up having to have new lenses put in my eyeballs. By the time I hit 50, was long enough, I couldn't see nothing. I developed macular degeneration in my late 30s. And that's an old person's condition. It's dry and it's stable, so I'm not blind yet. But and I of course, I told you, you asked me about my dog earlier.
Yep.
You know, my dog that had been out there that night, who wouldn't let me bring her back in. You know, we started noticing behavioral changes in her. She started acting weird. She started to lose her hair. And we first thought she had mange because it got kind of what it looked like. But then it started falling out in places where she couldn't rub it off. And she started developing big black sores all over her skin, on her back and her head, and her eyes whited over, like got white and hazy. Her teeth started falling out in the food bowl. She just, I think we had to put her down. And I think, I'm trying to remember, it was in the fall when we had to put her down. I can't remember whether it was like September or October, somewhere in that area. But we took her to the vet, and I mean, we didn't say anything about the June 30 night, but you know, basically the vet just like, she's suffering, she's dying, she's miserable. We need to, you know, give her some peace. So that's what we did. But she was out there with me that night, and I'm telling you, it always stuck in the back of my head. Look what that happened to my dog, you know. Is that going to happen to me someday? So far, so good, except my eyes. But, you know, so yeah, it's been weird. And then strangely enough, you know, it's like 25 years after that, the book's been out, published, the public knows about it more. Bud gets a letter from a woman who lived the street behind my mom's house. Now, she couldn't definitively say the exact date, but she said around that time frame, I can tell you that my teenage boys used to sleep in the garage with their friends all the time. When they'd sleep out, they'd have sleep outs in the garage. And you know, there was a big wooded area between her house and my mom's house. And there were big spaced out properties. And she said one night those boys came in screaming bloody murder, that there were like dozens of basketball-sized white balls of light floating through the woods. Wow. And it was the woods between our house and theirs. Okay. And she's like, when my mom reported seeing the basketball-sized ball of light around the bird feeder, which is what prompted her to call me home that night, which I didn't know about till a week later, because she couldn't remember it till a week later. And the basketball-sized ball of light that I saw float up and down in front of me next to that thing, you know, it's possible that it could have been the same night that happened to me. She said she couldn't say for sure the exact date, but she kind of had a feeling it might have been.
Okay.
And he had interviewed the neighbors. One neighbor said she sound that night that happened. Her whole house shook and it woke her up. She was in bed. She was a nurse and she worked the off shift, so she was asleep. She goes, it woke her up because she said it sounded like an airplane was about ready to crash into my house. And she goes, the weird part about it was all of the clocks in the front part of the house stopped, but not in the back. And then the neighbor next to mom said her whole house shook and she saw a red flash of light from my parents' backyard, and it terrified her. Her TV turned red. It terrified her so much that her husband, when he came home from work, she was frantic and he was beside himself. He didn't know what to do with her because she was afraid somebody was coming to get her. And we didn't even know them at the time. I know. What is that? That's a hell of a story. I mean, that's my life. And when you tell people that, they're like, what? Like, yeah.
Yeah, you spoke about the lawn marks. Did they change over time?
But it pretty much stayed there for a couple of years. I mean, the ground was so compacted and hard that you could take a hunk of that soil from the area, put it in a glass of water, and next day you still have a hunk of soil. Mm-hmm. If you take a hunk of soil from anywhere else in the yard and do that, you'd have mud. Yeah. Snow melted off of it that first year when we'd get an inch or two of snow, and it would dust all the grass. Within half an hour, if you'd look out the window, there it would be, that mark. The snow would literally melt right off of this, and it didn't feel hot when you were around it. I don't know why the moisture it was repelled by it.
Okay.
And then when it did start to grow back, it healed from the outside in like a sore or a wound. And the grass that did grow back eventually was thicker, bigger blades, and it was more of a deep purpley green than actual grass. It looked different than the rest of the grass. So, but yeah.
Did Bud take any soil samples at the time?
Yeah, he did. He did take samples, even though it was months after the fact by the time he got to the samples, Right. He did take some and have some tests run on them. I think there were a few interesting things they found out about it in regards to bacterial life in the soil. There was nothing living in the soil, no bacteria at all. And they had to bake it, at a ridiculous temperature for like 12 hours to get it to even remotely look like this. I actually still have like 10 Ziploc bags. So my parents passed away and we had to sell the house. But before we did, I went out. I had collected these samples while this mark was still visible. And then when my parents passed away and then we got ready to sell the house, I went out and collected some more samples in the spot. So I actually have like 10 Ziploc baggies with various samples. And I have the dates that it was taken written on them that I've kept all these years. And I don't know how it survived the tornado other than it was in an old chest and the chest was damaged, but the stuff in it survived. So I actually still have them.
I love it. So when was the EEG done?
That was the first trip I went to New York. After I reached out to Bud, and he read my letter and he called me, I guess for whatever reason, he decided that he was going to do an investigation on, this particular case. One time I asked him when I was in the studio, he showed me like boxes with hundreds and hundreds of letters in these boxes. And I said to him, I know I was in this box. I said, but why did you decide to answer my letter? Why did you decide to do the investigation on me and my family? And he goes, well, kid, that's the $64,000 question. He says, I don't know, but it is what it is. Destiny, I guess, Mm-hmm. So anyway, the first trip that I went out to New York to meet him, I actually had to sell my washer and dryer that I had put in storage to get enough money for a bus ticket to go. And then I felt crazy doing it. Because it was crazy. Mm-hmm. But he had arranged for me to talk to a psychiatrist and arranged for some verbal and written psychological testing. And he had also arranged for an EEG and a CAT scan with the dye that I had to sign a release for to make sure I did not have a brain tumor or any physical problems with my brain or any kind of seizure disorders or anything like that that could account for what I had reported. And then the psychological testing was for, to make sure I wasn't, delusional or schizophrenic or hallucinating or, whatever. Somebody else paid for all this stuff. I did not pay for it. I don't think Bud paid for it. I think he got donations from either these doctors or other people that had money that were interested in the subject, because I didn't have to pay for any of it. Thank God. I didn't have any money. Yeah. And I think it was done at Columbia University Hospital or something like that in New York. I don't know. It's written in the book. I can't remember. It's been so long. But they decided my brain was normal and that I wasn't crazy. I got papers. The only thing they came away from with this testing was that I was of above average intelligence and that I had symptoms of something called post-traumatic stress disorder, which back then, back in the 80s, that wasn't something that people even knew about. I had no idea what that even meant. But I did know you had to have something traumatic happen to you to have that. So that was kind of interesting. I remember telling the psychiatrist during the testing, you know, if I'm crazy, it's okay. You can tell me. I'd be more than happy to take a pill and make this all go away. It wouldn't hurt my feelings anyway. Just let me put it that way. You know, and they're like, well, sorry, but you're not crazy. And I'm like, well, my dad might beg to differ, but.
Okay. That's so funny. You started, I think you started getting like these images coming to you, visions, symbols.
Mm-hmm.
One particularly about a pyramid.
I had lots of drawings with pyramids. I was obsessed with the pyramid shape and the triangle shapes. I remember I did a drawing of pyramids, 3 pyramids with this giant sun behind them. And then, you know, the crop circle started showing up 10 years later, and some of them looked like my drawings. But after I talked to Colin Andrews and some other people about it, I discovered that I'm pretty not the only person that was doing that sort of thing back then.
Okay.
But yeah, I was, and I did a drawing once. I don't know if you saw it, of the moon with multiple black triangles returning to the moon. I was specific that they weren't coming from the moon. They were going back to the moon.
Wow.
I don't know where they had been, but I did this drawing. Yeah. So.
Wow. So one of the drawings looked like a crop circle, I believe.
That was most of my drawings were done in the late 80s. And I think most of the crop circles were late 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. So there was, I think, maybe about a 10-year period of time between the time I had these images in my mind and then drew them and then started to. I'll never forget the first time I saw a crop circle on TV. It was one of the very first ones. And it was kind of a complex one. And it had a triangle with 3, each point of the triangle had some kind of design coming off of it. I can't, Wilkesbury or Silbury Hill or something I can't remember which one it was. But I saw it on TV and I had a literal physical response to it. The hair on my arms stood up. I literally fell off the couch at the television. I mean, this was the big old fashioned TVs with on the ground, you know, the big one. And I felt super hyper excited and happy and like almost delirious, like with this. I was so amped by the vision of this symbol. It did something weird to me. Not most crop circles did not have that effect on me. Very few did, but that one, the very first one I saw, was like a jolt from somewhere that like flipped my switch right on.
Did anything happen with the crop circles that, you know, all the round crop circles that are sort of linked together?
I did that drawing. I was outside with my kids playing one day, and my little one loved bubbles, soap bubbles. And he had one of those big wands with a bunch of holes in them, and he kind of went like that in front of me, and this glob of soap bubbles just kind of hung in the air in front of me. And I had this like Roy moment from Close Encounters, you know, when he sees the mashed potatoes and it reminds him of something. You know what I mean? And I was looking at these bubbles and I thought, that means something. That means something. And I drew it. And I called it Casey's Bubbles, is what I named the drawing, because it was my son's bubbles, you know. And later I remembered somehow someone told me that universes looked like bubbles. And sometimes they connected briefly. They would brush up against each other. And it was these points where they touch, where communication could be facilitated, but that it wasn't permanent. It was fleeting and it moved and changed.
Okay. Amazing.
I know. I mean, all because I looked at soap bubbles and something triggered my memory, you know?
And this was in the 80s?
Yeah, I think late 80s, early 90s at this point. Yeah.
It's not a subject that we talk about. Maybe now, but not
Not
back
back
then.
then.
No.
No, I had no.
Wow. How about the old woman, June 92?
Um, you know, I was trying to think about that the other day. I was looking at a picture.
Mhm.
I think I was still at my parents'. I think I was still my parents at that time. A small tornado had come through, and we didn't have any power, and um, there was mom and dad had a generator, and it was loud as hell at night. The gas generator, you hear it kick on, and the generator went off, and I woke up. But when I woke up, there was a soft light in the room, even though there was no power. And then I realized there were 8 people standing around my bed, and they looked all different kinds of people, really all different kinds of life forms. Some of them didn't really look like people, but they weren't scary or ugly. And the old woman was the one that spoke to me, and they asked me. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing in my room? And it's like she said they were coming to check on me because I'd been through a lot, and they wanted to make sure I was okay. Oh. And I said, who are you? She's like, you don't remember us? And I said, no, I do not remember you. And she's like, we really don't look like this, but this is for you. We look like this for you. And she says, we just want you to hold on. Everything's going to be okay. You're doing fine. And everything's going to get better, And then the next thing I know, the generator kicks on. The sound comes on. I kind of like wake up. They're gone. And I think that old woman might have come from that memory that I had, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh. I didn't really write anything down with that I could find. So, I mean, it's kind of sad. Like I told you before, there's some things, all kinds of little things that it's been 30, 40, 50 years, and some of them I'll look at them and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that. Quite a bit of it I remember. The big stuff I remember too, because I don't know why it's like burned in me. It's like the day you heard JFK was assassinated, or the day you saw the Challenger explode. I mean, that impact that kind of burns into your memory forever, that you will never forget it,
But they were checking up on you.
Yes, that's what she said. She said they were checking on me to make sure I was all right because I'd been through a lot.
Wow. I'd feel
I don't know
like
who they were.
Blessed, happy. Okay.
I've always felt, I had a lot of fear and terror in the beginning because it's just shocking to see things like that you don't expect to see. But I also, as I've gotten older and my experiences have changed and not been so physical anymore, and it's more of a mind thing now, and I'm not afraid, I do feel fortunate and protected sometimes. Yeah. I don't feel afraid anymore at all, much to the chagrin of some other people I know out there who have had experiences that, and I'm like, I feel bad for them because I don't know how I got this way, but I hope they can find that way too someday.
See, I tell people to pray because there is something out there and we are being watched. They do listen. So
can you hear my
the
weather alarm going off?
Yeah,
that's the weather alarm. It doesn't look like it's too close to me right now.
Okay.
My husband is in there, so hopefully he'll wake up and turn it off.
Wow.
Looks like it's in Lafayette.
Like, speak of the devil, you did have your house get torn to bits by a tornado.
Oh, yes. Do you want me to go pause and turn that off? Because
I don't hear it anymore.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's off to me. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, in 2013, you know, November, I'll never, that day will live forever. November 17th, 2013, my house was hit by an almost F3 tornado. F3 start at 165 miles an hour, and they clocked this one at 160 miles an hour. So 5 miles an hour don't really matter much. My house was completely destroyed, and I was in the closet with my husband and my pets, and we survived without a scratch on us, but we lost everything we owned, except the weird part was the stuff that we were able to salvage was things that you can't replace, like baby books and bronze handprints and my grandpa's crucifix from the army and stuff like that. We found all that stuff in the debris. We lost everything else: cars, furniture, everything, clothes. We were at the mercy of our neighbors. Fortunately, we had just moved here 3 months before it happened. I did have it was weird. When we lived on the farm, I had birds. I had a cockatoo that I hand fed and raised. I had a blue front Amazon that was my father's that I inherited, and I had 2 little cockatiels. And 2 weeks before we moved into this house, I told my husband, these birds can't come with us. And he's like, what? And I said, they can't come with me. I got to find new homes for these birds. He goes, well, that's crazy. How the hell you think you're going to find homes for 4 birds in 2 weeks? Good luck with that. I found homes for these birds in 2 weeks with people I knew who took them. And I would have never thought they would have, but they did. And I was thankful. And it saved those birds' lives, because had I brought those birds to this house, they would have all died. Right, yeah. Because anything outside of the closet was gone, or destroyed. I couldn't have gotten 4 huge bird cages in my bedroom closet. Those birds would have died. Oh. So something told me, you can't bring those birds to this new house. Not if you want them to survive. They can't come. I kept telling my husband, they can't come. I've got to find them new homes.
Oh, thank God.
And I did, and they survived.
Yeah, I know there's a photo out there of the town. Receiving. Well, you can actually see the entire part that got ripped apart from the tornado.
All the swath through it. Yeah. Now, my house was the only one on my actual street that got completely flattened. The neighbors on either side of me had roof damage, and the guy next door's garage got jacked up. But everybody else in the neighborhood, it was like siding or shingles or, debris in the yard or what have you. But my house got flattened. Now, the subdivision across the road from us took a bad hit, but it's like it came through Cedar Crest on the ground, lifted up over my street, got over my house, and goes, oh, there's Deb. And it went touchdown. Actually, it touched down just in my backyard right next to my house, on top of my mini barn, which completely disintegrated, and we never found it or anything in it. And then went back up and then went back down and tore up a bunch of more houses. I mean, this is a small town of about 25,000 people, and 60 people lost their homes, and like 40 businesses were destroyed. That's a lot in a little town like this. Then it happened again 2 years later on the same freaking path.
What?
And it was stronger this time, but it skipped over my street and went to the street behind us this time, but not before my husband got video of it coming right towards us, and you can see it. And actually that one made the national news because it destroyed a Starbucks in the Markland Mall parking lot. And the little manager of the Starbucks, there were like 30 people in that Starbucks, and he put them all in the cooler right before the tornado hit it, and it flattened the Starbucks except for the cooler. Right. And he saved all those people's lives. Wow. So Starbucks bought him a car, and they've rebuilt now, but that was like a mile from my house. Wow. This one was stronger than the tornado that hit us.
Where were you when the tornado hit the first time?
I was in my bedroom closet.
Sweet Lord. Okay.
Hey, 5 minutes before the tornado hit, we had just come home from work, from eating out with my stepdaughter and her husband. And we had, I kicked my shoes off. We got beers out of the refrigerator. We were going to watch a football game in the living room. So I'm sitting on the chair with my feet up on the ottoman and the beer, and the weather alarms go off, just like you just heard a minute ago. Mm-hmm. And then all the alarms on our phones started going off. And then the TV went black. And it came on a weather emergency, which is above a tornado warning. That means you are in the path, take cover now. And about 30 seconds after that, our power went out. And I jumped up, grabbed the animals. My husband grabbed the other animals. He looked out the front door and he goes, "Oh my God, get in the closet right now. It's coming. I can see it." And we dove into the closet. I laid down on top of my pets. About the time we got into the closet, it hit. And it sounded like a roar, and then the house shook like a earthquake, and it got harder and worse and worse. And at one point I thought, I'm going to die. And I felt really calm. I'm like, okay. At first I was calling for my mom, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to die. Well, this is how I'm going to die, and then the roof came off with a loud snap, and that's when everything just exploded. And I started to scream, but I couldn't even hear my own voice. My ears were popping, and it was so loud. It sounded like bricks and glass and a wood chipper on my head. And the next thing I know, I looked up when the roof snapped, and it looked like boiling oatmeal right on top of me. And I covered my head again. And when I did, I thought my husband had been sucked out of the closet, because when I looked again, he was gone. But he had managed to get the door open. This is when it passed. And as soon as he got out and shut the door, the whole brick wall collapsed in on me and the animals. So we couldn't get out, and you could smell gas. And he was trying to shut the gas lines off and get 911 to help dig me and the dogs out. And the ottoman that I had my feet on right before it all hit was found a half a mile away in the middle of the interstate, or in the highway, in the middle of the highway on Markland Avenue. That would have been me had I not gotten up. That's some craziness.
Did the ETs check up on you after that?
Well, you know what? It's weird because if you go on YouTube and you Google Kokomo UFO in a tornado, November 17th, 2013, somebody south of here was videotaping a UFO flying through the clouds during the tornado as it was hitting Kokomo.
Really?
Yes, I know. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know about it until I was watching the Weather Channel, and they had that strange weather or whatever that thing is they have on at night. And it was on an episode of that.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? No one has told me about this. So I Googled it up on YouTube, and sure enough,
crazy.
There it is. Clear as a bell, flying around in the tornado while that tornado was tearing my house up. So imagine that. Not surprised, but
okay.
No, I didn't have anything. I don't recall anything particularly paranormal happening after that. Seems like during those tragedies in my life, they kind of leave me alone for a while.
Okay.
It's like, like when my husband committed suicide, not this one, but the one before, and I watched him shoot himself in our backyard, talking about trauma. It's like, and I didn't want to have anything to do with anything. I'm like, this stuff just needs to leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. And it did for a long time. So, but it always comes back. Kicks me back into it one way or another, because it's just my destiny. It's me. It's you. It's my life. It's who I am. So
about the man that walked on water.
Linda asked me about that, and I could barely remembered it, but and I don't know if it was a dream I had, like a lucid or vivid dream where I was at a lake or something and I saw this craft above the water and it was like spewing water into the lake. It was like a waterfall or something.
Wow.
And I saw the men walking around on the water, and he walks up to me and he's like, they told me they were returning water. They were returning the water that they had taken
Wow.
to study or something,
Okay.
and wanted to know if I wanted to come aboard and see. And I said, yeah. And they put these shoes, these things on me, like they reminded me of those booties that you put on in the hospital over your shoes.
Oh yeah.
And then I could walk on it too.
Wow.
And that they told me that, they loved me and,
Oh.
that that were watching over me. And I mean, I can't exactly remember what they said, but I know it left me with a very wonderful feeling of being cared about and watched over and loved. And, it's like, we'll come back for you someday. And, just weird stuff, like a weird dream like that. But it was a very nice dream.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
or memory, whatever you want to call it.
So these events, they change you. At least it gives me hope. Makes me feel
Yes.
good.
I had a dream one time. I called it a learning dream about a hummingbird. I don't know if you have read that. But I mean, I was sitting in a lawn chair out in the yard watching the kids play, and something was buzzing around my head, and I thought it was a bee. And I had one of those little plastic wiffle ball bats in my kids had been playing with it. I picked it up and swatted at it with it because I didn't want it to sting me, like, get away from me, bee. And I hit it and it fell to the ground at my feet. And it turns out it wasn't a bee, it was a hummingbird.
Oh.
And I was dead. Oh my God, my heart was broken. I thought I would die. It hurt so bad. I felt so terrible and I was bawling, and I picked it up and I was crying and holding it close to my heart and talking to it, and this is a long dream. It went on for a long time, in the dream, like a year passed, and I nursed this thing back to health, and I loved it. I gave it love, and, I felt so bad about it. And I prayed about what I had done. I prayed that it would forgive me, and, it did. And it was my friend, and it hung around me and everything. And then, then it was over, and I heard this voice from somewhere say, "Do you understand what this was?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Don't ever strike out at something if you don't really know what it is for sure, and don't judge quickly. Stop and think before you strike out or you do something." Yeah. And they said, "Very good." And then that was the end of the dream, and I woke up.
Oh.
And it was one of those lucid, vivid dreams that I used to have, little things like that all the time. I have two kinds of dreams. I have the lucid, vivid dreams like that stick with me. The more awake I am, the more of it I remember. And a lot of times I'll write them down. I would write them down.
Yeah.
And then I have the dreams like I think everybody does. I wake up and I think, oh man, I think I had a crazy dream. You might remember bits and pieces of it, but an hour later, you don't even remember you dreamed. So I have two different kinds of dreams, Okay. And now as I'm older and I have these vivid dreams, I feel as if I actually sometimes go somewhere else in this dream that I'm not even here.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's progressed over the years.
Okay. I took notes regarding a C-section and a sailboat.
Oh, that was my near-death experience.
Okay.
I was pregnant with my first child, and I developed eclampsia, which is a very dangerous condition for a pregnant woman. And I went into heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure, and I was semi-comatose. When they took him by cesarean, he was at least 6 to 7 weeks premature. But they didn't have a choice, because it was either do that or I was going to die. So, and you remember, this is 42 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I had the emergency C-section. Well, I could remember, they must not have given me hardly any anesthetic, because I remember them cutting me open. I remember how it felt. It was a burning, pinching, pulling feeling that was horrible, but I couldn't scream or move. I was paralyzed. but I felt everything. And I could hear them. Somebody mentioned something about Geist Reservoir and sailboats. And I'm like, why are you talking about this? I can feel, I wanted to scream so bad and say, I can feel this. I am not asleep, you know, but I couldn't. And then all of a sudden I felt this, all of a sudden I felt this sensation. The voices that I was hearing started to fade and go away, and they sounded farther and farther and farther and farther away until finally I felt this whoop. And I felt like at that moment, I literally disconnected from my body, and I was in my body, but not connected to it. I could feel myself, my hands, my feet, everything, but I couldn't see anything. It was all black, but I could feel this wall around me. And I started to pound on this wall with my fists, and I was trying to scream, I'm not dead. Let me out of here. Let me out. And I was pounding and pounding. And then I heard a voice really loud, like it was in my ear. And it said, you can't leave yet. You got a baby who needs his mama. Now, in retrospect, I think that was a nurse whispering in my ear. Okay. I don't think that was some ethereal. I think it was a nurse in my ear telling me, you've got a baby and he's alive. Because, you know, this baby needs his mama, you know. And as soon as I heard that, when I was screaming to get out, I forgot I had a baby. But as soon as I heard her voice and tell me that I had a baby now that needed me, it was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. And I sucked back on to this. I reconnected to this body. And when I did, all the sounds came back, and they were loud, and people were hollering and screaming back and forth. There was just chaos. I could hear it. And it got louder and louder until finally I was able to shake my legs. And as soon as I shook my legs, I felt the straps go down around them tighter. And I thought, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And then I don't know if I was intubated at that point, but all of a sudden, I mean, I think they took me off the table once and then put me back on the table. But then I felt the air suddenly go into my lungs for the first time. And it felt like so wonderful. I was gulping the air down like I was dying of thirst and gulping water down. I was gulping this air into my lungs and finally filling my lungs up like, you know, like this. And, you know, I was alive and I woke up and I ended up in the ICU. My baby was in the NICU. They couldn't get my blood pressure down. And the doctor came in and talked to me. And he said, let's put her on a stretcher and take her to the NICU so she could see. Because I kept saying, you're lying to me. My baby's dead and you just don't want me to know about it because you don't want me to die. You're lying to me. And he goes, I'm not lying to you. Your baby's not only is he not dead, he's doing miraculously well. They rolled my ass into the NICU on a stretcher right up next to my baby. And he was screaming. And as soon as I stuck my hand in there and held him by the foot and said, Mama's here, he stopped crying. 7 days later, this baby and I went home. 7 days. I died twice on the operating table, and I didn't even know it until nobody told me until I got the bill, and there was 2 crash carts on the bill, 2 resuscitation things. And that baby, we knew he was early because he didn't have any fingernails or toenails yet, just little dents where they would come in. Yeah. His ears were still curled up like this, rolled up. His eyes were still shut and purple. The irises hadn't even developed yet. They told me he'd probably need glasses, which he did. And he had long, silky white hair all over him that within about 3 days had rubbed off on him. It had rubbed off. But they called him the little peanut. He was 20.5 inches long and weighed 5 pounds. Oh. But he was 6 to 7 weeks premature based on his development. But his lungs were completely formed. The only problem that he had in the NICU was he had no body fat, so he couldn't keep his temperature up. He kept getting hypoglycemia. But, you know, he came through it. The doctors would come in and tell me, you know, it's not the size of the baby, it's the size of the fight. And apparently this one wants to be here.
Yay.
And obviously mommy wanted to be here because I died twice and still
Yeah.
came back.
Thank God.
And that's my 42-year-old son, who is a Microsoft engineer. He's brilliant. He is a genius. And he does all kinds of amazing things with computers and software. You know, that's him.
Nice story.
Yeah. But see, I didn't have your typical near-death experience.
No.
I didn't see a tunnel of light and angels and people that, you know, were dead to come and get me. But I saw enough to know that when we die, we just shed this body, because I felt myself disconnect from it. And had she not told me and reminded me of the baby, I mean, because the minute I disconnected from it, I forgot all about the life that I just had. All I could think of was that I'm not dead. Get me out of this box so I can go on.
Yeah.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
So I know when we pass away here, when we die, just this body dies, not our souls, not the essence of who we are.
So you don't recall like seeing from higher up the operating room, the personnel?
No, I heard them.
Yeah.
I don't recall seeing anything, but I heard them definitely.
Wow.
First they were talking about, and when I said something to the doctor about, you know, I tried to tell him, afterwards I said, I could feel you cut me open. He goes, no, you couldn't. I'm like, yes, I did. I said, I could feel you, but I couldn't move. And I said, you don't just slice people like they do on TV. I said, it felt like a pinch and a pull and a burn and a pinch and a pull and a burn. And he looked at me kind of funny, but he didn't say anything. And then I said, you were talking about sailboats at Geist too. And then he was like really looking at me weird, but he never said anything. He never confirmed or denied it. Now I think it's actually a thing. I've seen other people talk about it on TV. And other people have been through that. And it's where they were trying to give me as little anesthetic as possible for the baby's sake, because this was an emergency cesarean. But they apparently, when they give you anesthetic, they also give you something that paralyzes you so you won't move and they'll slip, you know. So apparently they gave me the paralyzing stuff, but they didn't give me enough of the anesthetic to make me unconscious.
Okay.
And that's actually a thing now, but 42 years ago, that wasn't a thing. Doctors just looked at you and rolled their eyes back then.
Yeah. Jesus.
So tell me about it. Next time I had a baby, I had to have therapy because I was so scared.
How about your mother? There's a story about her after she died.
My mom passed away of lung cancer, and I was in the room with her when she passed away. But before she died, we used to talk about death a lot, because I was the only kid she had that was comfortable with it. And, she felt like she needed to talk to somebody. And I'm like, okay. She's like, what if we die and we just poof, we just are no longer exist? I go, that's not how it happens, Mom. She's like, but what if it is? And I'm like, well, then why do you care? You won't know anyway. So what difference does it make? I said, she goes, you really don't think that we just stop being? And I said, no, we don't. I know we continue on. The body stops, but we don't. Mm. So I said, do me a favor, will you? When you get over there, if you can, tell me, give me a sign. Tell me that I'm right, that we go on. She's like, all right. And so the night she died at 11:30 in the morning, there was a long day with family. And then I drove home and I was exhausted. I think I got home about 11:30 or 12 o'clock that night. I went up, got in bed, and it may have been maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. My husband and I were awakened by this crashing sound in the upstairs hallway and all the way down the stairs. And we jumped out of bed and ran down to the landing. And there at the bottom of the stairs was my mom's picture, upright, looking right at me up the stairs. I had a whole wall of family photos of them down the stairwell. And that's where it had been. And I'm like, well, oh my God, that's Mom. And my husband is like, well, the nail's still on the wall. Maybe the cardboard hanger had ripped. So went down and got the picture. The cardboard hanger was perfect. There was nothing wrong with it. It had not torn, and the nail was still in the wall. That picture lifted off the wall and rolled down the stairs and woke us up. And I said, that was Mom.
Yeah.
She told me she would come and tell me if there was something after this. And she did. And I got so happy. I was so happy and so excited, you know, and I was like, yes, yes. And I couldn't sleep. My husband, my dog was flipping out. My husband goes back in the kitchen to get something to drink. I'm sitting downstairs now on the couch in the living room. And on the 3 edges of the steps going up to the first landing, I had 3 angels, little edge sitter angels that went up there. Yeah. One of these in front of my eyes and in front of my dog, one of these little angels literally leaps off of the step, rolls across the floor and stops at my feet.
What?
And my dog was like, she was panting and carrying on. She was seeing something that I couldn't see. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Mom. She's saying, yes, yes, that's right. I'm doing this because I told you I would. You know, I mean, seriously, I mean, that cinched it for me. And then my brother and sister, they're like, well, how come she didn't come to me? And I'm like, did you ask her to?
True.
No. I said, maybe she thought that if she did, it would scare the shit out of you. And she didn't want to scare you because you didn't want this experience. I told her to, I wanted her to. And she did. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then my late husband did the same thing when he passed away. All kinds of stuff happened right after he died to tell me, and not just me, but other friends that he was still around. And yeah, I know. So it's like, you know, I have so much confidence in my belief of another life after here that it changes the way you live your life when you realize you're not going to die. I mean, I'm not afraid to die. Now, death is another thing. Getting there, I'm not looking forward to. No. I don't like pain, but once I'm there, I'm good. You know?
The fear of death, yeah. The death of self. You don't.
Dying, I'm not thrilled about. Death is fine.
So did this happen? Was this like a contributing factor to you becoming a paranormal researcher?
Yes, actually, I think it was a little bit. I mean, because I really started to get more interested in paranormal after people that I love started dying off. You know, I mean, and I'm at the age now where I probably know more dead people than living. So I got a better chance of somebody reaching out to, you know, maybe that's why I get such good EVPs. I don't know.
Okay.
But I think that kind of helped a lot. I wanted to understand more about the whole thing and what people see when they report these things. And honestly, I've come to the conclusion that some things people report may not be dead people at all. I don't think some of these things have ever lived here.
Okay.
And I think some of these things may have been, maybe we've inadvertently contacted some other dimension or some other universe in some way. And then I go back to the bubble thing. And I had an EVP. Did I mention to you about the EVP of the old man that I got that started me into the whole interest in that?
I don't recall now.
Years and years and years ago, way before I really got even interested in paranormal stuff in general, I was interested in the electronic voice phenomenon. And I tried an experiment with my nephew one time, and we sat there and recorded an entire hour of nothing. You know how hard it is to sit and be quiet for an hour, especially me. Yeah. And then when we listened back to it, almost immediately, there was a voice that was so clear. It was if this old man was sitting right next to me, and he said, are the spirits listening? And immediately after him, another voice said, can I listen too? Wow. And I had this epiphany. At that moment, I looked at my nephew and I said, oh my God, we are the spirits somewhere else. And somebody is trying to hear us.
Wow.
And hear snippets of us.
Wow.
And my nephew's like, man, that's deep. I'm like, yeah, I know. I felt like that's correct. You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, later on when I got involved more with paranormal research and paranormal community, I began to realize from what I'd seen that, you know, a lot of UFO or contact or ET contact reports sounded similar to some of the paranormal reports that I'd gotten. Some sounded identical. And also, based on some things I've seen over the years and heard, you know, I got that feeling that some of these things people record or see or videotape aren't spirits of dead people that have parted on, but maybe something that's alive somewhere else, or something that was alive somewhere else. I don't think all of them have ever, some of them maybe have never lived here on this planet in this form, you know? So I think there's a connection somewhere in all that, that somehow, oh, this is all tied together. The only common denominator that I've been able to figure out or find in the last 20 years has been the actual experiencer themselves. So I don't know what that means, but, you know.
I'll be sharing with everyone the EVP that you sent me regarding Ginger. Do you want to talk about that?
That's my favorite EVP of all time. The best one of the best ones I have. I got a lot of really good ones. But I was with an Indianapolis group at the time, and we were doing a private residence. The home was empty. We had our base station set up out in the attached garage. The only thing in the house was the family dog. One of the complaints of this family, and it was a newer home on a newer property, was that there was a little girl that would run up and down the hallway, and they would hear her at night, and it was disturbing them. And so in the family room off the kitchen, we had one of our night vision cameras up in the corner of the room so it could get the whole room. And it had a microphone on it as well. And we also had my little recorder on the coffee table. And at some point in the night, we confirmed it because we had the visual, and we could track the visual with the timer, the timing on my recorder, which is also set to, time it for the time. That when the dog walks past my recorder, which was on the edge of the coffee table, my recorder picked up the voice of a little girl that was so clear that it sounded like that was actually a little girl in the room. And she said, "Hi, Ginger." And the dog's name, we didn't know at the time, but the homeowner confirmed the dog's name was Ginger. I mean, it don't get any better than that. I mean, we were talking to each other on the phone all night after that when we found that, So, I mean, that is why I do the stuff that I did. Yeah. I know, it's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I've listened to a lot of EVPs back in 2000, early 2000s. And because there's a lot of ghost stories in my family. That's why when I learned about being an experiencer, that didn't really phase me out. But listening to yours, that's probably the best one ever, because, a lot of people put these things online. You can barely hear anything. You can make out stuff, but mostly it's gibberish. But yeah.
I've got a lot. I don't have, a ton, but I have some very good ones. My tendency to, when I would review my data after we'd do something or I'd have a session, some of the stuff that I see on TV, honestly, I would have trashed. I wouldn't have even considered it if it wasn't clear. And anytime I let anyone listen to it, I never told them what I thought it sounded like. I wanted them to tell me. And we had a rule not only in the group that I began in, but the one I formed later. The number one rule during an EVP session is do not whisper. Because Debbie might be listening to this, a week later and not remember somebody whispered something and think it was something it wasn't. So do not whisper. If you want to say something, say it loud, because it ain't like you're going to wake up dead, you know? So
so let's talk about your new book. The book's called Abducted, Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders. So that's a follow-up of your book with your sister?
Okay, the book with my sister was called Abducted, the story of Intruders Continues. And that was just really, if you took it apart, it was just two small books put together. One of a lot of the stuff we just talked about, and then my sister's experience. For years and years and years, people were like, "Oh, you need to, do a revised edition," And I didn't really talk. I didn't go around and speak much about it. I was trying to actually have a normal life, and I had a job, so I couldn't do things like that. And my job was important to me. I had bills to pay. So, but then eventually things continued to happen, and I started changing and growing, and my experiences started changing. So I thought, well, I should do this. This is important. And I'm not getting any younger. Dad had dementia. Now my older sister has it. And I wanted to get these things out of my head and on paper before I lost him forever, especially for my granddaughter. I wanted her to know, now that she seems to be having some kind of interest in it, I wanted her to know who she comes from, Mm. So when I first started I got all of the files from our original book. And we saved them from the tornado off of a hard drive that they were on. Wow. And when I tried to transfer them to my new computer with Microsoft Word Office, the formatting didn't transfer. Okay. Oh my God, what a disaster it was. For you might have a paragraph of readable text, and then there'd be like 18 pages of characters and things that I didn't even know keyboards could make. You know what I mean? So it took about 5 years to unravel that mess.
Wow.
And then in that meantime, my sister had all those strokes, and a lot of other things happened in her life and our life that would make it apparent that there was no way she could participate in this, and this was going to be mine. So I fixed all of her chapters, but I just took everything out and put it aside. And I took my old chapters and I went back through them, had to reread everything a million times, and added to that, built on it, and added, several chapters of the following years beyond that, and different experiences that happened beyond that for me, and different, ways of growth and change and everything. So it ended up being almost a completely different book at that point. So after I secured a publisher and had a little discussion with them, it's like, this is really just a whole new book. So that's why we gave it a whole new title, and people will recognize a few of the stories in it from the first book, but that's because that's my life and it's a part of it. And so that's why it's there. But there's a lot of new stuff in there.
Good.
So that new book is called Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders. So,
well, hopefully those that enjoyed your story today will we'll look at the link that I'll be adding to the description box so they can purchase the new book.
Yeah, you can purchase it on Amazon. It's in paperback and Kindle form, and you can also purchase it through Barnes and Nobles. And I think that my publisher has told me that it'll be available through pretty much every online book distributor, worldwide, eventually within the next few weeks or so. So
okay, well, awesome.
And then I have a website. And come if you want to talk to me, you want to share your stories with me, your experiences with me. You can email me through my website, and there's lots of pictures and stuff on there too.
Awesome. So we've been at this for almost 2 hours and a half.
Yeah, I know. And this tornado weather it's getting close, but it still isn't here yet.
Thank God.
So we made it. Yay. That's the thing. When you're talking about a multitude of things that happen in somebody's life.
Yeah.
And then that somebody is 62 years old, that's a lot of life, and that's a lot of things and a lot of stuff. So it takes time.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being thorough. I know I love details. People love details, and thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for asking me. I appreciate it. So really, I appreciate it a lot, and it's nice to meet you.
Yes. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So,
oh,
so thank you so much. So to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's show. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Gray, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.